This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Landmark College, offering comprehensive support for students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and ASD. Learn more at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College, we teach differently. This is Dr. Ned Hallowell, and welcome to Distraction. I'm really, truly happy to welcome to Distraction the brilliant and personable and wonderful Maggie Jackson, author of the equally brilliant book, Distracted. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you, Ned. So good to be with you again.
Yeah, so the book is now out and available?
It's out in a second edition. I'm really pleased to report. It launched a couple of weeks ago with a new cover and a new introductory chapter, catching people up on the landscape of distraction. And then the book itself has been updated throughout.
It is an instant classic, and I relate to and our listeners relate to. Could you just sort of riff on it a little bit without my asking you leading questions?
Sure. Well, I guess in thinking about the issue of distraction and even how it's changed over the years, of course, we all know that it's still an issue, a crisis very much with us today. In fact, it's, the issue of distraction has gotten on people's radar screens as, we suffer from this on the roads and in hospitals and in classrooms and around the dinner table and just with the TV still running in the background of American life. So I think that we're recognizing the problem as we once didn't, as you and I know. We're recognizing distraction is a problem, but at the same time, we're failing miserably to actually get a handle on this crisis, and that was really the starting point for this new edition of the book. And I think that it's extremely urgent, all the more, not just for the lost lives and the lost squandered moments, but also there's a new special urgency, I think, to grappling with distraction individually and societally for a couple of different reasons. One is that the technology that's very much a part of this, a central part of distraction, begins to be taken for normal. We don't really think about turning on the electric light switch and what, that invention does for our sleep cycles anymore, right? And I think we're seeing the same kind of novelty fading from the devices that are so seamlessly wedded, to our bodies and our minds. And that makes this, the idea that the devices that propel distraction are being taken for granted. I think that makes this issue all the more, urgent for us. So I'll talk a little bit about that, I think, for, in a couple of minutes. But the second reason I think we're facing, we need to face this crisis more squarely is because we're also beginning to see the scientific research related to the long-term costs. When you and I were first beginning to try to understand distraction and what the attentional system of the human brain was or is and what the latest science, we really didn't know what the grand social experiment of technology was doing to our minds and our lives. And now it's not just the moment when you're pulled away by the beep or the ping that's broken or fragmented. It's not just that lost productivity. You are training yourselves to be a different kind of thinker. The research shows that high, avid multitaskers are suckers for irrelevancy. They cannot discern, they're less able to discern the trivial from the important in their lives. Wow, full stop, wow. And, people are able to only absorb information in shallow ways when they're splintering their focus. So therefore, there's a cumulative effect that you're corroding your knowledge. As professors tell me all the time in college, that a kid who's kind of splintering their focus throughout semester 101 and multitasking through their homework as well, comes back and it's as if they didn't even take the course. Their memory is so, Swiss cheese-like for that material. So I think those are a couple of reasons why this is urgent and it's important. All the more.
So memory is failing, and they can't separate out what's important from what's not important.
Yeah, it's as if life is being looked at from the windows of a speeding train cognitively. And the science really shows that these problems, these costs are real, and that you don't even have to multitask all the time to suffer these kind of long-term cumulative effects. You're training your brain, and we all know the brain is plastic.
So if you saw someone being murdered from a speeding train, it wouldn't have much impact.
You wouldn't be able to pick up the complexity or the nuance or the observational details that you would. For starters, your memory for that event might be, again, more shallow because you're using different parts of your brain when you're multitasking than when you're fully focused. When you're fully focused, the new science of consciousness now tells us you're creating what's called the global workspace of the brain. It's fascinating. It's a wonderful term. When you're focused on something, your brain is going into a highly connected state. So it's broadcasting that information. As you can see, you're connecting that new information with the old and sifting and sorting and doing the kind of meaning making that you want your mind to be doing when you're learning something new. When you're multitasking, that's not going to happen. So what can occur is you might learn that material. You might get an A on the quiz the next day, but over time, you're going to be able to, that material is more ephemeral. It'll be, lost to you. It's not as deeply embedded, but also that material, if you even remember it, will be more kind of rigidly held in your memory. In other words, you can do that same problem that you learned while you're multitasking, but you won't be able to transfer that kind of problem solving, and that transfer, of course, is the root of wisdom and creativity. That's what stretches us, expands our capabilities. So we're really becoming, and I think this is interesting when you look at the headlines of today, just multitasking avidly seems to make us into more rigid thinkers, inflexible thinkers, and unable to draw on our knowledge stores in these wonderfully flexible ways. And wow.
And how does it do that?
Well, because the memory that you have for that new material is, not as connected, not as assimilated with your kind of, branch-like architectures of knowledge. You've done the work of remembering, but in a shallow, surface way. You're not using that kind of hippocampal-driven networks of memory that really give you that wonderful, flexible type of knowledge. And the other cost or urgency I feel right now is that, say you're hopscotching around and being distracted. Well, what does that carry with it? There's an assumption there. If I'm looking at two things at once, my child and my laptop, I'm assuming that I can understand both at a glance. You're making a leap, an assumption in what you can do, and there's a kind of hubris there. It links, I think, also to how we operate online. There are new studies coming out of Carnegie Mellon and Harvard that show when you Google something, people who've used Google just briefly are actually, it's kind of changing what it means to know something. Their need for cognition, in other words, their willingness to struggle with the problem, drops significantly after just a short time searching online. Again, you're thinking that you can get it, understand it at a click. and you're moving on, and you're used to that. You're just hopping around. You don't even see the need anymore to go deeply.
All right, so those hours I spent in the stacks of Widener Library were worth it.
I think so. I for many, many, many reasons. It just seems as though in the culture and I love the fact that you mentioned the stacks, because I think that in a culture where learning and knowledge and understanding one another was more slow, was more, difficult, you might say, or just more of a search in the deepest sense of the word, then you basically knew that, there were going to be digressions. You knew that things weren't going to come instantly. You knew that somehow serendipity was important. I think we live in a culture now where we're not trying to go to those slow places. And the worst part is we think we don't need to. That's the rub. It seems as though we can become informed with these, but then again look around us at the, mistakes or misunderstandings or the error prone, the costs that I just outlined. We all know that feeling of doing it, on the hop, in a cursory way, and how it does come back to bite us in the company, around the family dinner table. There's a new kind of term that a professor in the Midwest has coined. I love it, called technoference. And that's to describe the stress, anxiety, and resentment that occurs when technology interrupts the togetherness of either couples or families. This technoference.
So when you're having dinner and someone's looking down at their cell phone, that's technoference.
Exactly. And there's work now that shows that, people are really, that's correlated. It's correlated, not causal, but correlated work show that even a tiny toddler on a tablet is linked to higher feelings of lower well-being among mothers and depressive symptoms. Similarly, the higher the technoference between couples, the more well-being by mothers is shown to be lower. So I'm not sure whether they've studied fathers as much, but it's, again, it's this punctured space that is not just a space to get things done. It's the foundation to build, to move forward. You see, building the idea or the thought, working through the problem. The space of your attention is the protective zone, the opportunity to build forth problem solving or to build a relationship, which it doesn't take an easy, quick track. Building those conversations, learning to read one another. All that, again, is not knowledge that we can win at a glance.
All right, well, I'm going to change the subject for a few minutes because I have Rachel Wolfson on the phone, and I want you to hear her story. Hello, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I am a stand-up comedian in Los Angeles, California. I am originally from Las Vegas, and I am a Landmark graduate, class of 2008.
And what did Landmark do for you?
Oh, wow. It taught me how to write a paper, for one. It really gave me such a platform and a foundation to go on and be successful in a way that I never really had before until I got there.
And how did they do that?
Well, they really teach you how to learn in kind of a personal way. I loved the small classroom sizes. I loved that my teachers were more like mentors and less like just trying to give us a bunch of information. They really cared about your growth and success as a student. And what do I need to do to get stronger,
Well, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And to be working as a writer and a stand-up comic, obviously Landmark served you well, and you've served Landmark well. Thank you so much, for Rachel, and thank you for joining us. If you'd like to learn more, just go to lcdistraction.org. Do you have a few words you want to close up with?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I would definitely recommend Landmark College to anyone who, may be struggling because of their learning difference. Landmark will at least be a good stepping stone and a good place to start. And it's okay to not have all the answers, but it is good to have a plan. And Landmark did help with that. And I'm really grateful for Landmark for providing me with that. And thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Take care. It's easy enough to convince people about an error because you can point it out. But how do you convince someone of the importance of, spending 6 months reading Samuel Johnson or spending 6 months getting to know a human being? How do you convey the rewards of a deep relationship with a person or a body of knowledge?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, I think now I was just talking with families about the technoference issue, and I was really actually shocked at how upset. It was a very unscientific collection of families I was interviewing, but I was very amazed by how people do sense what's being lost. There is a tremendous amount of resentment. It's not something we've worked out, but I think that the loss might instigate or maybe inspire the necessary step forward to try to find some of that gain. And of course, we don't want to throw this all away. We certainly, I'm the first to love to mess around in the digital sphere and find information that way and communicate with my friends. It's just that the counterpoint needs to be the rebalancing. We're off kilter. We can't live just that one way, quick and easy. So I think that we're at a tipping point where people are wanting to try something new. The hunger is there. The question is, what are the solutions? And I think that, so the solutions that we have been trying, I don't think are working. Often the solution is to turn back to the machine, to the device, download the Freedom app, draw the boundaries around your focus. I think that's a good tool and a good starting point. But that's not actually, I think there is a sort of a fallacy that if you take the digital detox or you use the Freedom app or self-control, then everything will be well. And your attention will be rejuvenated and cultivated again. Bingo! Almost like, Rousseau in the forest, the natural attention will spring back. But that's not true, of course, as you know. We need to, I think, pay more attention, be more accountable to the skills that are needed. And that's wonderful. I mean, just as we exercise and build muscles of the body, so too, I think people are beginning to understand that we need to build those networks of the brain. We need to build the skills related to focusing and being highly aware and then having that kind of executive attention. And these things can be trained in just tiny little daily ways. Some of the nursery games that people play with children or board games, those are being used in scientific studies, and they're shown to develop attention.
Yeah, we're just having conversations. What's the Freedom app, by the way?
The Freedom app is just one of the many kinds of apps that turn off the internet at a certain time, or that you can use to get off the grid, or to filter out certain types of things on your laptop or your device. So it's kind of like doing the focus for you, but that's only a starting point.
And now, where do you and Sherry Turkle? Are you sort of the same kind of message, or? I
think we are. We're very, I know her well, and we're big fans of one another's work, and I've been I interviewed her, profiled her in the Distracted book way back when she was, before she wrote her more popular books, and so I think that, I think I have the similar concerns about, again, waking up to the impact of our devices. I think that she, of course, has been talking quite a bit about conversation, and I think that's really important. But I guess I tend to take a more broad view, looking some of the big picture.
So how do you sell it, Maggie? How do you you pointed out and not that you need to sell it, but I mean, you pointed out the dangers, and they're pretty profound. How do you compete with the dopamine squirt you get from?
Well, I think that when people are more aware of the research, when they do know that the scientific studies do back up some of their kind of uneasy feelings about the excess or the extremes of use, when a mother is equipped or a father is equipped with a study showing exactly what the screens do to kids' ability to sleep, well, then they can develop practices at home, and I think that people are taking the phone away at 9:00, etc. I think also we need to carry on the conversation. More than we've done in the past. Again, this has been maybe these devices have been adopted and adapted to, and we had a very gee whiz kind of it's all wonderful attitude toward them. That's now changing, and I don't think that a down with technology kind of backlash is warranted. But I think that, we're having a more mature conversation. And historically, this is, very much what has happened throughout hundreds of years, that at first a device is, released into a marketplace. The inventors, so-called, dominate the conversation. The telephone companies early on thought that this was a business tool and were shocked that people were using it for social engagement. And then there's a kind of a back and forth. And so I think that it's really, we're having the kind of mature conversation we need right now. And to spread the word, I'm very much trying to spread the word about some of the costs, but also some of the very doable solutions. I mean, coming from a background where I started out writing first overseas about social trends, and then I was one of the first columnists in the United States to write about work-life balance, and the very first to add technology into that mix. Now we're beginning to hear the idea of about digital well-being. So I was asked I was one of the first external speakers asked to go out to Google's largest conference of the year, the Developer I/O conference, this year, and the topic was digital well-being, which means we can learn from the great research going on about human flourishing, and we can learn about what it means to strike work-life balance and all that we've learned about flexibility, and we can learn about how technology fits into that mix and how distraction and attention fits into that mix. And one of the biggest lessons there is that tiny steps work. It used to be we scratched our heads about work-life balance and thought that anybody who wanted flexibility, their career was ended, and in some ways that's the way we treated it. But then we began to discover that maybe somebody just wanted to go home at 3 on a Friday, in the summer. and that kind of tinkering, those kind of small steps are really important.
And maybe, having breakfast with your spouse once a week can make up for a lot of being away,
Or a study shows that just taking a tech break 1 minute out of 15 helps kids, is more restorative to their focus and attention. It kind of somehow helps repair some of the splintered focus that they're bringing to their homework. I think that the same is probably true. I mean, 1 minute just to stand up, walk around or daydreaming, or to daydream is a wonderful thing for your mind anyhow. So those are tiny little steps.
Yeah. I think really it sells itself because, you have biology on your side, and I can tell you the it's on everyone's mind. Everyone knows that it's gotten out of hand. And, so I think everyone is looking to curtail it and bring back the human moment, and let's connect without technoference, and you've led the way. You've been the pioneer. It's been wonderful, Maggie.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And we're all in the trenches, fighting the good fight however we can. And I think that we're at the moment where people want to make it work. They're not sure how to, and that's where we all need to put on our thinking caps and tinker.
Well, let's close with a few action steps from you. What, for those people who want to do it, what would be a few action steps you'd recommend that a person could do without waiting for policies to change?
Sure. Well, I think that it's really wonderful to think about boundaries in a new way. We haven't really, we thought that boundaries should be taken down between home and work and in all sorts of spaces. And you think about a boundary like a kitchen table as maybe being a tech-free zone, or just 6 to 8 p.m. as being some place where we don't have our devices. So we can be really creative about boundaries. That 1-minute tech break that I just mentioned is a kind of boundary making. So I think that's really important. That you can kind of declutter your environment, and then you're providing the foundation for more focus. I think that it's also really important to have along the lines of boundaries. In fact, welcome rituals, welcome rules. They're not the big bad wolf of family life, and they're very important. A kind of ritual of, we're taking a car trip. Well, for 2 hours, we're going to be just two together, and it might not be all fun and games, although we can try to play some. And so we'll try to, have that ritual, and it's remarkable how that's a wonderful foundation for being together.
Yes. Well, those are terrific, and all in the service of connecting at a human level, and
connecting to ourselves as well, connecting to that inner life that sometimes also we've grown deaf to as a result of the noise and the busyness and the overload.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Maggie Jackson. Your book, Distracted, is ready to be purchased at Amazon and bookstores, and your wisdom is ready to be reaped and used in everyday life. You're a great resource, and we're lucky in the Boston area that you live here. Thank you so much for joining me today. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell. If you have a question for me or a show idea for us, email it to connect@distractionpodcast.com. Or better yet, call us and leave a voicemail. Call 844-55-CONNECT and leave us a message. We really look forward to hearing from you. So 844-55-CONNECT or email at connect@distractionpodcast.com. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. Our sound engineers and editors are the wonderfully talented Pat Keogh and Chris Latham, and our producer is the multi-talented and unbelievably brilliant Sarah Curtin.